The next 30 minutes, or 27 minutes to be technical, Phyllis Schlafly joined us a week or so ago, but we can only get about 15 minutes with her, so she's been gracious to come back with us. Really needs no introduction. She's the national leader of the conservative movement since the publication of her best-selling 1964, A Choice Not an Echo. She has been a leader of the pro-family movement since 72, when she started her national volunteer organization, now called Eagle Forum, who's really done a great job all over the country fighting the NAFTA highways. Ms. Schlafly's monthly newsletter, called the Phyllis Schlafly Report, is now in its 43rd year. Her syndicated column appears in 100 newspapers plus. Her radio commentaries are heard daily on over 500 radio stations, and her radio talk show on the education called the Eagle Forum Live is heard weekdays on 75 stations. EagleForum.org is her website. We have her information linked up at Infowars.com. And I wanted to get her on about the so-called conservative movement. Because, we see Republicans giving us government almost as big as Obama. Bush doubling government, Obama tripling it the first year. And we see these articles about Republicans mainline are going to come in and, teach the Tea Parties how to behave. And Giuliani saying they could be a problem. And so there's this struggle. Can the Republican Party be used to try to restore the Republic? And we're going to talk to Phyllis Schlafly about that. Also, we're going to get her view on what's happening right now with the big State of the Union coming up tonight. Gibbs told us yesterday and today there will be gun grabbing pushed on the heels of the drug addict lunatic in Tucson that had nothing to do with conservatives. They tried to frame people with. That they will call for everybody to shut up their political rhetoric because we're telling the truth and it's effective and hurting them. Their climate tax, their carbon taxes, their government takeover of health care. They want us to shut up. And they're saying speech is bad. So they're not just attacking the Second Amendment. Now it's the First Amendment. Very brazen, calls for the return to the fairness doctrine, restricting free speech on talk radio. And he's going to claim he's going to try to balance the budget and have earmark freezes. Now he's suddenly talking like Rand Paul. We'll see if that's the case. But I wanted to get Phyllis Schlafly's take on all of this. Phyllis, thank you for joining us.
Hello, Alex. Good to join you.
Good to have you. What do you want to tackle first? What's going on with the Republicans and where you see it headed, or the State of the Union coming up?
Well, I can't predict what Obama's going to say. I know the media have been trying to predict everything, but I think he's not moving to the center. He's just a left-wing socialist like he's always been, and he's trying to soothe people with some good words. So I don't believe there's any real change there in Obama. I think he is a dedicated guy who, just as he told Joe the plumber, he wants to spread the wealth around, and that doesn't just mean from people who are taxpayers to non-taxpayers. It means from the U.S. to other countries around the world. And, however, the conservative movement, I think, demonstrated its force in the November elections. I believe in the two-party system. That's what we've got. I'm not a supporter of any third party. I think that we're going to have to retake the conservative control of the Republican Party, which we did in 1964 and then we did in 1980, and somehow it slipped away under George W. Bush, but we can get it back, and we welcome the Tea Party people.
Phyllis Schlafly, you knew Ronald Reagan well, and of course, Nancy Reagan, and Reagan did some good things on the Second Amendment and cutting taxes. But are you saying that this modern conservative movement is going to try to imitate Reagan? Because I don't like the big giant war on drugs. I agree with Ron Paul on that. It's been used to take our liberties, and look what the war on drugs has done in Mexico. Just like liquor prohibition, increased crime and corruption of police. I don't want to see the mainline kind of Republican move towards invading all these countries that's bankrupting us. I mean, when you say true conservative movement, how do you define it on, like, the TSA and the groping or all these wars? I mean, where do you stand on that as the leader of the Eagle Forum?
Well, I think the biggest war going on at the present time is immediately south of our border. And we certainly don't want to let it come into this country. I agree that we ought to have a fence on the border, as Congress has voted, and even Obama signed, or voted for, and George Bush signed. And I think that's where more people are being killed than any place else. So we cannot let that drug war come into the United States. I think the immigration issue is tremendously important. I think the The illegals are coming in and taking jobs from our people who are high school dropouts. We already have a great supply of high school dropouts. We don't need a new supply of them. And so I think that should be a major focus.
Sure, but specifically to my question, because, we saw what Newt Gingrich did, Mr. Carbon Tax, Mr. Globalist with the Republican takeover in '94. I'm specifically saying, where do you and the Eagle Forum stand on, we don't just have all of the entitlements that the left likes. We've got all of these giant military-industrial complex situations going on, and specifically, we look at the Netherlands and others that have decriminalized many drugs, and their crime rate has imploded. They're shutting down prisons. I mean, where do you stand?
I'm certainly not for making drugs legal. And it was on the ballot in California, the trendsetter of our country. And I think everybody thought legalization of marijuana was going to take place. And surprise, surprise, the people voted it down.
Well, I've got to say, we've got triple the heroin, double the cocaine flowing in we had 20 years ago.
Well, that's because the big majority of it's coming in from Mexico, and I think we should take every step necessary to stop it.
Well, what do you think about the TSA saying that they've got to do all these things to us, keep us safe, but they did just cancel the virtual fence? As you know, they never built.
Well, the virtual fence was always a fraud, I think. We need a real fence, a real concrete fence. Fences work in other countries around the world, and you need a double fence, and you need not to let the illegals come in.
Sure. Shifting gears back over to Obama, he got that 15-point Gallup bounce that's short-lived. It's already dropped down to 12 in just a week after that poll came out from the shooting, and he had that political pep rally there in Tucson with the 14,000 T-shirts about Together We Thrive, and really tried to capitalize on it and tried to attack the First Amendment. What's your view on that whole debacle?
Well, of course, what happened in Arizona was a tragedy, but I think Obama is trying to capitalize on it. Clinton and I think Rahm Emanuel, too, have said that after Clinton was beaten in the Republican off-year election in 1994, he felt that he bounced back because of the Oklahoma City bombing. Now, I don't understand that, but apparently that's what he believes. And so that urban legend has percolated through to Obama, and I think he was trying to get his bounce back from the Arizona killing, which, of course, he had nothing to do with. We're glad he expressed his sympathy, but that's enough. Move on and do what he ought to be doing.
Well, there are calls for the internet kill switch. That's in CBS News today under federal control. Cybersecurity.
Well, we certainly don't want CBS running the internet.
But, CBS is reporting on that they are pushing the internet kill switch, and I'd be against that under a Republican president or a Democratic president. And we do see the push for the fairness doctrine. That doesn't sound too liberal. That sounds authoritarian.
Well, of course, the effort to talk about reinstating the fairness doctrine is an attempt to get Rush Limbaugh off the air. Yeah. They know he has a powerful audience, and when they got rid of the fairness doctrine, then we got Rush. And, of course, when you have freedom out there, the conservatives can win because we have good arguments and we can make our case, and the liberals can't get any ads to run their show because they're so boring and they don't have any answers.
Well said on that front. Phyllis, you probably don't even remember who I am, but in the last 16 years on air, I've interviewed you every few years. You've been friendly to come on with us. I wanted to bring up another issue because we're talking about who controls these political parties, and we know that Wall Street gave all that money to Obama, but also to McCain. We know that Wall Street a lot of it is offshore now, and pushes for having open trade with China, but then they're not fair with us. What's your view on China and Hu Jintao's talking down the dollar and all these things that are happening? What's the Eagle Forum's position on Chinese relations?
Well, I think China is the enemy. If you read any of the press that you get out of China or you get India reporting on China, they hate us. They're building up their military because they want to be the one superpower, and they're doing it with our money. And I don't think we ought to let them do it. And this thing of Obama making nice with Wall Street, this CEO of General Electric, who's pro-Obama, He's creating jobs in China. He's not creating jobs in this country. And it's all a big hoax. And Wall Street gives to the person they think they're going to win. And, of course, they thought Obama was going to win last time, so they were generous to him. And I think we ought to do something to reclaim good American jobs in this country. That is what we need, and I don't hear anybody giving any good answers to that.
Well, you get rid of NAFTA and GATT. We were told it was going to be wonderful by Al Gore. Look what it's done.
Yeah, look what it's done. I agree with you. I was opposed to NAFTA. I was opposed to GATT. Incidentally, I think GATT's the one that was ran through in a lame duck session, and I think they decided against the U.S. in 6 out of 7 cases they've had. So that's the way it is when you deal with these.
Yeah, it's certainly one way. Now, getting into another issue, do you know Charlotte Iserby, who was the head of policy at the Department of Education?
Yes, I do.
What's your view of her work?
Well, I haven't talked to Charlotte in a number of years, but she certainly did very good work and exposed a lot of mischief in the education department and in the public schools.
Sure. My view on this is that I respect her and the work she's done. And, you know, she certainly said nice things about you. But overall, she's been critical and said that just like the left, and I don't see it as a leftist organization because they got Republicans and Democrats in the Council on Foreign Relations, who we know pushes for globalism. But I know I've read you've been involved in conservative think tanks and organizations you know, from their inception, like the CMP. Where does the CMP stand in all of this?
Well, they don't have any policy position. They just meet to have a good time and meet at the Ritz-Carlton and enjoy talking to a lot of important people.
Yeah, there's been kind of leftist professors and people over the years that have been kind of threatened by people exposing the CFR Trilateral Commission, who are on record having, you know, the entire power elite in them pushing for globalism and world government. But then I get reports and, you know, hear people say that, you know, that really, you know, things like the CMP, that's the real, you know, the real power out there, and that it's actually been used to take over conservative movements. What's your view on that?
No, they haven't taken over the conservative movement. I urge people to be active in the Republican Party because that is the vehicle by which we can achieve our political goals. But you certainly are right about the CFR. And I have a lot of objections to them, but one of the things I've talked about recently is one of their papers they put out. You know, there are always people who are wanting to rewrite the Constitution. They think they can do a better job. And you know, what is the provision of the U.S. Constitution that the globalists hate the most? It is the treaty provision that says you've got to have a 2/3 vote in the Senate in order to ratify treaties. And they've have manipulated around. NAFTA was not a treaty. It did not get the 2/3 vote. I don't believe GATT did either. And they've gone to great lengths to try to get these international agreements through without obeying the treaty provision of the Constitution, which I think is just great, because most of those UN treaties cut a piece of our sovereignty out and give the control to some commission of left-wing so-called experts.
Well, one other reason I brought up the CMP is I know any organization, you know, with any, you know, organizational power, there are going to be people inside of it who have globalist tendencies. But I did see a Seymour Hersh report that said that the military in the U.S. is being run by the Knights of Malta and by Opus Dei, and then I'd seen claims going back decades that those groups were powerful inside the CMP. What do you think of what Seymour Hersh is saying?
Well, those people are all Catholics, and I can tell you there are not very many Catholics in CMP.
Yeah, because I guess it's James Dobson and people who are Protestants in there.
Oh yeah, it's largely evangelical, and they don't have any policy statement. They just get together for the conviviality of it.
Absolutely.
And the Knights of Malta, most of what they do is charitable work. It's completely a Catholic organization. I don't think they have any political.
Sure, I mean, absolutely. From looking at the CMP rolls, it's predominantly Protestant, but at the same time, I mean, certainly there's powerful networks.
I'm sure they would be offended if you said the Knights of Malta and Opus Dei ran it.
Who would be offended?
The members of CMP.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think anytime something's secret, people start asking questions.
That's right.
So, I mean, what does go on at CMP meetings?
Yeah, just speeches and dinners. That's all. Just speeches and dinners. They don't pass any resolution. They don't endorse any candidate.
Sure. Was it set up by the Hunt brothers?
No. I think in the early days, Bunker Hunt was a member, but the other Hunt, the famous one, was never a member.
Sure. Well, I see things like Howard Phillips, who does, fights NAFTA, GATT, the New World Order. He's pretty, I see good fruits from him, and I see you doing a lot of good work. I do see a lot of mainline, what you call rock rib Republican, hardcore conservatives, tend to turn a blind eye to a lot of big government stuff out of Republicans, but I'm glad to hear that. I know for many years you've spoken out against that, and Charlotte was saying to me on and off air that you're one of the better members of that. She just is critical of CMP because when she tried to get into the Carnegie documents and others that came out in congressional hearings dealing with the plan to merge the U.S. and the Soviet Union together back in the 80s, that CMP didn't want to hear about it.
Well, education has not been something that they've been particularly interested in. In fact, I'm complaining about that. I personally think that a lot of well-to-do people have their children in private schools, and they don't care what happens to the public schools.
Sure.
And while I've paid a lot of private schools and private colleges, I recognize that 89% of the kids in this country go to public schools, and we're paying for them. And I feel they should be taught the correct American history, and they should not be taught that they should forget what their parents taught them, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, Phyllis Schlafly, stay there. Final segment with you. I want to get into other topics that you think are most important in the 5 minutes we have. Phyllis Schlafly, finishing up with the environmentalist. These aren't even environmentalists in my research. They're eugenicists. And more they're saying, look, it isn't even about carbon. It's about getting rid of people. We have Ted Turner praising the one-child policy of China. How do we stop these people?
Well, I think we have to keep speaking up against them because there are people who want to worship the earth instead of God. And there are people who want to limit the number of people. They simply want to get rid of a lot of the people. And let me mention before we run out of time, Alex, that if you run out of things to talk about on this program, you can always go to my website, eagleforum.org. All kinds of wonderful information.
Absolutely. You guys do a lot of good work, and you're fighting the North American Union. Where do you see the SPP going?
Well, that was the Bush project. And I think Obama is really more wanting to distribute our wealth to the rest of the world. He isn't confining it just to North America. But he hasn't done anything to close the border. And he did meet once or twice with the Mexican president, but that doesn't seem to be high on his agenda. But I'm certainly against erasing the border. We want the United States the way it is, and we don't want to combine with any other country. And I do think the disaffection with the euro has cooled off a lot of people on this idea of moving into a common market with other countries and sharing their currency.
Yeah, well, plus Mexico is a complete bedlam-filled hellhole, the worst on earth now for overall murders. Why would we want to merge with a third world kleptocracy?
I can't imagine, but they're sending their people in here and teaching their kids that Mexico really owns California, Colorado,
Texas,
New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona. And they should not be taught that in the public schools. I think we should have them taught the truth and not lies like that.
Well, I would even call that liberal. That's the globalist agenda through our schools. And, why did Bush push all of that, just like Clinton, just like Obama? And that's my whole point about, really going after conservatives and holding their feet to the fire. I've not been a fan of Rick Perry, but he's trying to, restrict abortions here and trying to make women get sonograms, which is, I think, a good thing. What's your view on that?
Yes, and I think if you see the new polls, well, of course, most of the Republicans who were elected in November are pro-life. It is just an amazing change, and the change in the public opinion polls is great. And I attribute a lot of that to the picture. We're kind of a picture society. People don't read much anymore. And when you look at the picture, they say, oh, that looks like a baby. Even a second grader can figure that out.
Absolutely. Well, Phyllis Schlafly, thank you for coming on and being interrogated about things here. And we really appreciate you spending time with us and look forward to talking to you again in the near future as things unfold. eagleforum.org. We'll talk to you again in the near future. Have a great week coming up.
Have a great day.
All right, there goes Phyllis Schlafly. And I brought up the CMP witch hunt thing while she was on with us.